Story number 1. Whispers of Barrow. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the bustling heart of Chicago, surrounded by the relentless hum of city life, the idea of spirits lingering in forgotten places seemed absurd. But Barrow, now known as Utqiagvik, Alaska, had a way of changing perspectives. It was here, amidst the endless tundra and under the ethereal glow of the northern lights, that my skepticism was brutally tested. The old house on Frostbite Lane stood as a solitary sentinel against the harsh Alaskan winter. Its weathered exterior bore the scars of countless storms, the paint peeling like dead skin from a forgotten creature. The locals whispered about it in hushed tones, referring to it simply as the house. Stories of strange noises and inexplicable phenomena clung to its foundation like the persistent snow that never seemed to melt. I arrived in Barrow with my wife, Sarah, and our 2 young children, Emily and Jack. We were drawn to the town by the promise of tranquility and a fresh start. Far removed from the chaos of city life, the real estate agent had assured us that the house was a great deal, affordable, spacious, and perfect for our needs. Desperation for change outweighed our lingering doubts about the eerie reputation of the house. The first night was uneventful, save for the howling wind that seemed to penetrate every corner of our new home. Sarah and I dismissed the unsettling stories as mere folklore, relics of a community grappling with the isolation and unforgiving environment. Little did we know, the house had its own story to tell, a story steeped in sorrow and restless spirits. It began subtly, late one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Emily woke me up from a nightmare. "Daddy, there's someone in my room," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. I rushed to her side, only to find her room empty. The window was slightly ajar, letting in a chilly breeze that rustled the curtains. Dismissing it as a figment of her imagination, I tucked her back into bed, promising to keep an eye out. The next night, the occurrences escalated. Doors creaked open and shut on their own, and whispers echoed through the hallways, too faint to discern but persistent enough to unsettle. Jack insisted he saw shadows moving in the corners of his room, figures that vanished when he turned to look. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances, our initial confidence wavering under the weight of these inexplicable events. One particularly frigid night, as snowflakes danced violently against the windows, Sarah and I sat in the living room, trying to make sense of the disturbances. The fireplace crackled, casting flickering shadows that seemed to play tricks on our weary minds. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. "Not again," Sarah sighed, reaching for her phone to use as a flashlight. But when the light pierced the gloom, we saw them, ghostly apparitions materializing in the room. Transparent figures, their faces etched with sorrow, stood motionless, watching us with hollow eyes. "Why are you here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. The apparitions remained silent, their presence suffocating. One of them, a woman in a tattered dress, began to float toward us, her expression mournful. Leave now," she whispered, her voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Terrified, Sarah grabbed Emily and Jack, pulling them close as we backed away. The apparitions dissipated as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving us in a heavy silence broken only by the raging storm outside. Desperate for answers, I turned to the local library the next day, poring over old newspapers and town records. That's when I discovered the tragic history of the house. Decades ago, a family had moved in: Thomas, his wife Margaret, and their 2 children, the same age as ours. It was a peaceful family until a brutal blizzard trapped them inside. Rescue teams arrived days later, only to find the house empty, save for signs of a struggle and the remains of a devastating fire that had consumed the home. The family was never found. Some say the spirits of Thomas and Margaret, unable to find peace, lingered, forever searching for their lost children. The unexplained phenomena that plagued each subsequent family mirrored the haunting experiences of those original occupants. It was as if the house itself was a prison, a nexus where sorrow and loss were trapped in an endless loop. That night, armed with the knowledge of the house's dark past, I resolved to confront the spirits and put an end to their torment. Sarah was skeptical, but her concern for our children's safety outweighed her doubts. We gathered candles, salt circles, and other protective charms recommended by local folklore, hoping to create a barrier between our family and the restless souls. As midnight approached, the house seemed to grow colder, the air thick with anticipation. We sat in the living room, forming a protective circle, candles flickering around us. The temperature dropped further, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The room grew eerily silent, the only sound the soft crackling of the fireplace. Suddenly, the apparitions reappeared, their mournful gazes fixed on us. "Why do you disturb us?" the woman in the tattered dress demanded, her voice echoing through the room. "We want to help," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "We know your story. Let us help you find peace." The spirits hesitated, their sorrowful expressions softening. "Our children are lost." Thomas's apparition spoke, his voice filled with anguish. "We cannot find them, and without them, we cannot move on." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she spoke. "What can we do to help? How can we bring your children back?" The apparitions began to fade, their forms becoming more transparent. "Find the letters," Margaret's ghost whispered. "They hold the key to our salvation." We spent the next few days searching the house, scouring every nook and cranny for any clues. In the attic, beneath layers of dust and forgotten belongings, we discovered a hidden compartment containing old, yellowed letters. They were written by Thomas and Margaret, chronicling their struggles during the blizzard and their desperate attempts to keep their family safe. One letter stood out, addressed to their children. It spoke of their love, their fears, and their hope that they would survive the storm together. But as we read, it became clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The final letters were fragmented, torn pieces that hinted at a tragic ending but offered no closure. Determined to complete their story, we reached out to a local historian who specialized in Barrow's haunted locations. He explained that many believed the letters needed to be buried with the family to allow the spirits to find peace. Without them, the house would continue to trap the souls of the lost family members, their sorrow perpetuating the hauntings. One snowy evening, under the pale light of the moon, we returned to the house with the letters. We carried them to the backyard, where the remnants of the old garden lay buried beneath layers of snow. Following the historian's instructions, we dug a shallow grave, gently placing the letters inside before covering them with the cold, unforgiving earth. As the last shovelful of snow settled, a profound silence enveloped the house. The air seemed to lighten, the oppressive heaviness lifting. We sat in the backyard, watching as the northern lights began to shimmer in the sky, their colors dancing across the horizon. Suddenly, the apparitions appeared one final time, their expressions serene and grateful. "Thank you," Thomas's spirit whispered, his voice filled with relief. "You have given us peace." Margaret's ghost nodded, a faint smile gracing her translucent face. "Our children can finally rest." The spirits began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night air, leaving behind a sense of calm and closure. The house, once a place of endless sorrow, now felt peaceful. The weight of its tragic history lifted. We left Barrow shortly after, the memories of those haunting nights etched into our hearts forever. The house on Frostbite Lane remained, but its dark legacy had been broken, allowing the lost souls to finally move on. Years later, I still think back to that winter in Alaska, the endless snowstorms, and the restless spirits yearning for peace. Taught me that sometimes, the scariest places hold the deepest pains, and the greatest acts of bravery come from the desire to help those who can no longer help themselves. Whenever I drive through desolate areas or hear the wind howl through the trees, I remember the lost family of Barrow and the night I helped them find peace. It's a reminder that even in the darkest places, hope and compassion can illuminate the path to redemption. Story number 2. The Endless Path. The Alaskan wilderness is a realm where nature reigns supreme. Indifferent to the struggles of man, I've always been drawn to its untamed beauty, the way the snow blankets the earth in silence, muffling the chaos of the outside world. It was this very allure that led me to embark on what was supposed to be a simple solo hiking trip, a chance to reconnect with myself amidst the vast, white expanse. I remember the day vividly. The sky was a clear, piercing blue, the sun casting sharp shadows across the snow-covered landscape. My backpack felt lighter than usual, the weight of daily stress seemingly lifted with each step I took deeper into the wilderness. The trail was well-marked, a testament to the efforts of the local ranger station to maintain safety for adventurers like myself. As the days went by, the isolation became both a balm and a challenge. The quiet was profound, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground and the occasional call of a distant owl. Nights were the hardest, darkness so complete it felt like swallowing cold, with temperatures dropping to unbearable lows. But I pushed forward, driven by a need to prove something to myself, something I couldn't quite articulate. On the 4th day, the weather took a turn for the worse. Dark clouds rolled in swiftly, swallowing the daylight and plunging me into an early twilight. The wind picked up, howling through the trees with a ferocity that made each step a battle. I decided to set up camp early, hoping to ride out the storm. The first night was rough. The howling wind seeped through my tent, and I struggled to find a comfortable position amidst the flapping fabric. Sleep was elusive, each gust of wind reminding me of nature's indomitable presence. By morning, the storm had intensified, turning the landscape into a whiteout. Visibility was near zero, and the trail markers were obscured beneath the relentless snowfall. Panic began to set in as I realized I was lost. My GPS had failed me, the device buried under layers of ice and snow. I tried to retrace my steps, but the storm had erased any semblance of a path. Hours turned into days, and my provisions dwindled. The isolation gnawed at my sanity, each moment stretching into an eternity of white nothingness. One evening, as I trudged through knee-deep snow, I heard it, a faint, desperate cry echoing through the storm. My heart raced. Could it be another lost soul? I followed the sound, each step fueled by a mixture of hope and fear. The cry led me to a clearing, barely visible through the blizzard. There, standing amidst the snow, was a figure, a child, no older than 8, shivering uncontrollably. "Please, help me," the child whispered, tears freezing on her cheeks. I approached cautiously, extending a hand. "Hey there, are you okay? Do you need help?" Her eyes were hollow, black voids that seemed to absorb the light around them. "I can't find my way back," she replied, her voice trembling. "I keep walking, but I never reach home." I offered her my jacket, wrapping it around her tiny frame. "Come with me. I'll help you find your way." She nodded slowly, and together, we set off into the storm. The child walked beside me, her presence both comforting and unsettling. As we moved forward, the landscape began to change subtly. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The snow seemed to shift unnaturally, forming patterns that defied logic. Night fell once more, and the storm showed no signs of abating. We decided to camp in the clearing, huddling together for warmth. As I drifted into a restless sleep, I was plagued by nightmares, visions of endless paths, each one looping back on itself, trapping me in a maze of white. I awoke to the sound of the child crying. Her voice was urgent, a stark contrast to the silence of the storm. "We need to keep moving," she insisted. "If we stop, we'll never find our way." Confused and disoriented, I grabbed my gear and followed her out of the tent. The clearing had transformed into something unrecognizable, a landscape of swirling snow and shifting shadows. The path ahead seemed to stretch infinitely, disappearing into the blinding white. We walked for what felt like hours, the child never tiring, her determination unwavering. But with each step, the terrain became more surreal. The snow formed arches and tunnels, leading us deeper into the heart of the wilderness. I began to question my sanity, the storm amplifying my fears and doubts. Then, I saw it, a series of footprints in the snow, not leading forward, but circling around in a never-ending loop. My heart sank. These footprints keep going around, I murmured, realizing that no matter how far we walked, we never seemed to get closer to anything. The child looked at me with those black eyes, her expression devoid of hope. "You shouldn't have tried to help me," she said softly. "Now we're both lost." Desperation took hold as I tried to pull myself together. "No, we can find a way out. We have to keep trying." But the storm intensified, the wind howling like the cries of lost souls. The footprints continued to circle, a maddening reminder of our futile attempts to escape. Exhaustion overcame me, and I collapsed into the snow, my vision blurring as I struggled to stay conscious. In my fading moments, I felt a presence, an overwhelming sense of dread that wrapped around me like the coldest embrace. The child stood beside me, her figure becoming more ethereal, almost ghost-like. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice echoing in the void. "We belong to the storm now." I awoke to find myself alone. The storm abated as suddenly as it had intensified. The clearing was peaceful, the snow calm and still under the first light of dawn. My body ached, and my mind was foggy, but I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find my way back. I set off again, following the faintest trails in the snow, my determination renewed. Hours passed, the landscape gradually returning to its familiar form. The trail markers reappeared, leading me toward the direction I had initially traveled. Relief surged through me as I realized I was no longer lost. But as I continued, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows lingered at the edge of my vision, and the memory of those hollow eyes haunted me. When I finally emerged from the forest, exhausted and frostbitten, I saw the ranger station in the distance. I stumbled into the warmth of civilization, the nightmare seemingly behind me. Weeks later, I returned to the station to share my story. The rangers listened with solemn expressions, nodding as I recounted my ordeal. They showed me old maps and logs, revealing the tragic history of the area, stories of lost hikers who vanished without a trace, their footprints disappearing into the snow like whispers in the wind. One night, while poring over the records, I found my name among them, listed as one of the lost. My heart pounded as I realized the truth. The path I had taken was cursed, a loop that trapped souls in an endless winter, forever wandering the snow-covered trails in search of escape. I never hiked alone again. The memory of that night remains etched in my mind, a chilling reminder of the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees, I hear the faint echo of a child's cry, a haunting melody that ensures I'll never forget the night I became one of the lost in the Alaskan wilderness. Story number 3. Whispers in the Frost. Winter in Alaska during the 1940s was unforgiving. The land stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of snow and ice that seemed to swallow all sound and light. I remember the first time I set foot on this desolate frontier, the cold biting into my skin, the wind howling like the cries of lost souls. But nothing could have prepared me for what lay ahead during that fateful winter training exercise. I was Sergeant John Harris, recently transferred to the 5th Infantry Division. The regiment was conducting advanced cold-weather survival training deep within the Alaskan wilderness. The purpose was simple: to prepare our men for the harshest conditions imaginable. Little did we know, nature had its own tests in store for us. Our platoon consisted of 10 men, all seasoned soldiers accustomed to the rigors of combat. Among them were Private Tom Mitchell and Private Eddie Lawson, two young men eager to prove their worth. The camp was set up near a sprawling ice field, the landscape eerily beautiful yet deceptively treacherous. The days were long and monotonous, filled with drills, exercises, and the constant battle against the biting cold. Nights were colder still, the temperature plummeting well below freezing. We huddled around our tents, sharing stories and trying to keep our spirits up. It was during one of these nights that the rumors began. Whispers of ice monsters had circulated among the locals for years, a myth of creatures born from the frozen depths, preying on those who dared to traverse the icy expanses alone. Most of us dismissed them as mere folklore, tales spun to scare inexperienced newcomers. But as the nights grew darker and the winds more relentless, the stories took on a sinister edge. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the snow, Private Mitchell approached me with a worried expression. "Sergeant, Eddie and I are going out to check the perimeter," he said, his voice betraying a hint of unease. I nodded, understanding the necessity of their patrol. "Stay close and keep your radios on at all times," I instructed. They headed out into the frigid night, their silhouettes barely visible against the blanket of snow. Hours passed with no word from them. I grew increasingly anxious, the isolation of our camp amplifying my concerns. I decided to investigate, gathering a small team to search for the missing soldiers. The night was thick with silence, the only sounds the crunch of our boots on the ice and the distant howl of the wind. We trekked deeper into the wilderness, the moonlight reflecting off the snow in a ghostly glow. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a lone footprint leading toward a deep crevasse. It was unlike anything I had seen before, large, almost human in shape, but with an unnatural curvature that sent a chill down my spine. "Look at this," Private Lawson whispered, pointing to the tracks. "They lead into that crevasse." I peered over the edge, the darkness below swallowing any sign of life. "Stay back," I ordered. "We need to be cautious." Suddenly, a scream pierced the night, a haunting sound that echoed through the valley. It was a cry of pure terror, one that froze me to the core. We froze, listening intently, but the only response was the relentless wind. "Did you hear that?" Private Mitchell's voice trembled beside me. Before I could respond, a figure burst from the shadows, a hulking shape moving with terrifying speed toward our position. It was tall and covered in ice, its limbs elongated and grotesque. The legends were true. The ice monsters were no mere myth. Chaos erupted as we scrambled to retreat, the creature pursuing us with relentless determination. Its movements were unnatural, almost fluid, as it glided over the snow with ease. We fired our rifles in desperation, the shots echoing futilely against the mountains. I watched in horror as the creature reached Private Mitchell, its icy appendage wrapping around him, dragging him into the crevasse with a strength that defied human capability. His screams were muffled as he was pulled into the abyss, disappearing without a trace. "Run!" I shouted, rallying the remaining men to flee. We sprinted back to camp, the monster in hot pursuit, his presence a constant, malevolent force in the night. By the time we reached the safety of our tents, dawn was breaking, casting a weak light over the devastated landscape. The camp was in disarray, our equipment scattered, signs of a brutal confrontation evident everywhere. Private Mitchell was gone, and Eddie Lawson was missing as well. The days that followed were a blur of grief and fear. Search parties combed the area, but all they found were the single footprint leading to the crevasse and the unsettling silence that followed our disappearance. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just an inexplicable void where our men had been. Months passed, and the tragedy of that winter lingered in the collective memory of the regiment. The stories of the ice monsters took on a life of their own, each retelling adding layers of fear and mystery. Some claimed to hear whispers in the wind, while others reported seeing shadowy figures moving in the periphery of their vision. Years later, I returned to Barrow, now known as Utqiagvik, to seek closure and honor the memory of those lost. The landscape had changed, but the haunting presence of the past remained. I visited the site of our camp, the crevasse now a frozen scar on the earth. Standing there, I felt the weight of those lost souls, their silent screams etched into the icy ground. I couldn't shake the feeling that the ice monsters still roamed these desolate lands, their hunger for the living an eternal curse. The footprint that led to the crevasse stood as a grim reminder of that tragic winter, a testament to the thin veil between reality and the supernatural. As I looked out over the endless snow, the northern lights began to dance in the sky, their ethereal glow casting long shadows across the land. The whispers of the past seemed to mingle with the wind, telling stories of courage, loss, and the unforgiving power of nature. In the silence of the Alaskan wilderness, I made a promise to never forget those who vanished into the ice. Their stories would live on, a chilling reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden in the frozen depths, waiting for the unwary to wander into their eternal embrace. Story number 4. The Frozen Echo. I've always been fascinated by the unexplained, the mysteries that linger in the shadows of our history. My fascination led me to the Alaskan wilderness, a place where nature's raw beauty conceals secrets that man was never meant to uncover. It was here, amidst the towering peaks and endless snows, that I delved into the story of the mysterious expedition lost in the 1920s. The year was 1924, and a team of 6 intrepid explorers set out to conquer one of Alaska's most unforgiving terrains. Led by Captain William Harding, a seasoned mountaineer with a reputation for leading successful expeditions. The group was eager to map uncharted valleys and document the region's unique flora and fauna. Their mission was ambitious, driven by a thirst for discovery and the promise of untold glory. Reports of their disappearance began to surface 3 months into their journey. The expedition had ventured into a secluded valley, now known as Frostbite Hollow, a place shrouded in perpetual ice and shadow. Rescue teams scoured the area for weeks, but found nothing, no signs of struggle, no abandoned campsites, just an eerie silence that seemed to swallow all sound. Years later, scientists stumbled upon a peculiar anomaly while studying the region's remnants. The explorers' watches, long thought to be lost, were discovered embedded in the ice, perfectly preserved by the freezing temperatures. Remarkably, these timepieces continued to run, their hands moving steadily despite the absence of their owners. The scientific community was baffled. How could the watches keep time when the men who wore them had vanished without a trace? Driven by curiosity, I decided to investigate further. Armed with old journals, maps, and the latest in modern technology, I embarked on an expedition of my own, determined to uncover the truth behind Frostbite Hollow's chilling enigma. As I approached the valley, the landscape seemed to shift, the air growing colder with each step. The sun barely pierced the thick canopy of snow-laden trees, casting long, distorted shadows that danced eerily in the dim light. My equipment felt heavy in the biting cold, each breath a visible testament to the harshness of the environment. Setting up camp near the spot where the watches were found, I pored over Captain Harding's journal. The entries detailed their journey into Frostbite Hollow, their awe at the untouched beauty, and a growing unease that something wasn't right. The last entry was particularly troubling. Day 45. The valley feels alive, watching us. Nights are the worst, whispers echo through the ice, and the shadows move with intent. We must press on. The map leads to something extraordinary, something that should not be disturbed. Determined to follow their path, I ventured deeper into the valley. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground and the distant howl of the wind. The landscape was a monochromatic expanse of white, the snow reflecting the meager light in a way that made everything appear both vast and claustrophobic. Days turned into nights, and my supplies dwindled. The isolation gnawed at my sanity, each passing hour amplifying the eerie feeling that I was being watched. The whispers mentioned in the journal began to haunt me. Soft voices that seemed to emanate from the very ice beneath my feet. Shadows flitted at the edges of my vision, always just out of reach when I turned to look. One evening, as the sun set in a blood-red hue, I stumbled upon an abandoned campsite. The remnants of the explorer's presence were evident: burned logs, scattered gear, and the watches, still ticking in the freezing cold. My heart raced as I pieced together the sequence of events that led to their disappearance. It was as if the valley had claimed them, trapping their souls within its icy grip. Desperate for answers, I pressed on, following the map to its final destination. The path led me to a massive ice formation, a natural cathedral carved by centuries of relentless weather. Inside, the air was thick with an otherworldly energy, the walls pulsating with a light that seemed both inviting and malevolent. In the center stood an ancient stone altar, its surface etched with symbols that mirrored those in the explorer's journals. As I approached, the temperature dropped further, my breath visible in the frigid air. The whispers grew louder, voices intertwining in a haunting melody that resonated deep within my soul. I reached out to touch the altar, my fingers brushing against the cold stone. Instantly, a surge of energy coursed through me, visions flooding my mind. I saw the explorers, their faces etched with fear and determination. As they stood before the altar, the shadows closed in, engulfing them in darkness, their screams echoing through the ice. "You cannot leave," the voices intoned, a chorus of sorrow and rage. "You belong to the valley now." I recoiled, stumbling back as the visions faded, leaving me gasping for breath. The whispers now formed coherent words, urging me to turn back, to leave Frostbite Hollow before it was too late. But curiosity and a sense of responsibility kept me rooted in place, determined to break the curse that held the valley. I began to decipher the symbols on the altar. They spoke of a balance between the living and the dead, a pact that must be honored to maintain peace. The explorers had unknowingly disrupted this balance, their intrusion awakening the valley's vengeful spirits. Realizing that the solution lay in restoring the pact, I gathered the symbols and chants from the journals and began the ritual. The air thickened, the temperature plummeting as the spirits manifested around me, their forms translucent yet menacing. The whispers turned into wails, the shadows converging into a swirling vortex of ice and sorrow. "Do not interfere," the spirits demanded, their voices echoing through the cavernous space. "The balance must be maintained." I continued the ritual, chanting the words with unwavering determination, feeling the weight of countless souls pressing down upon me. The ice seemed to come alive, responding to my every move, the spirits growing more agitated with each passing moment. As I reached the final verse, a blinding light enveloped the altar, the symbols glowing with an intense radiance. The spirits wailed in anguish and frustration, their forms beginning to dissipate. The balance was being restored, the valley's curse breaking free from its icy prison. With a final surge of energy, the light subsided, leaving behind a profound silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, the air growing warmer as dawn broke over Frostbite Hollow. Exhausted but triumphant, I collapsed to the ground, the map in my hands now blank, the symbols fading into nothingness. As I made my way back to camp, the valley seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, the shadows retreating and the whispers fading into the morning breeze. The watches, once symbols of the curse, now lay dormant, their hands frozen at midnight, a testament to the fragile boundary between life and death. Months later, I returned to civilization, the memories of Frostbite Hollow etched into my mind like the ice that had trapped the lost souls. The story of the two missing soldiers became a part of Alaskan lore, a chilling reminder of the valley's dark history and the price of disrupting nature's delicate balance. I share this story not just as a recounting of a historical mystery, but as a warning. The wilderness holds secrets that should remain undisturbed, and some places are best left unexplored. For in the heart of Frostbite Hollow, I learned that the past is never truly gone, and the echoes of those lost can reach out to those who dare to listen. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the Alaskan mountains, I hear faint whispers carried on the icy breeze, a haunting reminder of the expedition that vanished into the snow and the spirits that still guard their eternal home. Story number 5. The Unseen Frost. I've always been drawn to the wild expanses of Alaska, the untouched beauty that stretches beyond the horizon, where nature reigns supreme and man's presence is but a fleeting shadow. It was this very allure that led me and my brothers, Jake and Tom, to embark on a hunting expedition deep into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. We sought solitude, the kind that only the vast, silent tundra could provide. The trip was planned meticulously. We stocked up on supplies, maps, and the necessary gear to withstand the harshest of conditions. The days were long, filled with the thrill of the hunt and the camaraderie that only shared adversity can forge. Nights, however, were a different story. The darkness here is absolute, broken only by the faint glow of the aurora borealis dancing in the sky, a mesmerizing yet eerie spectacle that seemed to watch us as we ventured further into the unknown. On the 5th day of our expedition, we decided to explore a newly discovered snow cave. The entrance was concealed beneath a thick layer of snow, hidden from casual observation. Armed with our headlamps and a sense of adventure, we began the trek, the cold biting at our faces as we made our way down the narrow passage. The cave was a marvel of natural architecture, with walls glistening from the moisture in the air and formations that resembled frozen sculptures. We set up a temporary camp, the warmth of our gear providing a stark contrast to the frigid surroundings. As we settled in for the night, the silence was profound, broken only by the occasional drip of melting ice. In the early hours of the morning, a faint noise stirred me from my sleep, a soft, muffled sound that seemed to echo through the cave. I sat up, straining to listen, and realized it was a low, steady breathing, curious and concerned. I woke Jake and Tom, explaining what I had heard. We decided to investigate, our footsteps crunching softly on the snow-covered ground as we moved deeper into the cave. The breathing grew louder, more distinct, until we came upon a narrow chamber. There, lying motionless on the icy floor, was the body of a man. His clothes were tattered, frozen solid, and his face was pale, almost translucent in the dim light of our headlamps. What struck us most was the absence of any visible wounds or signs of struggle. He was simply there, as if he had fallen asleep and never awoken. Jake, the most practical of us, suggested we mark the location and report it to the authorities upon our return. But Tom, always the more superstitious one, felt uneasy. "There's something off about this place," he murmured, eyes darting around the chamber as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. We took a moment to gather our thoughts before proceeding. I reached out to check his pulse, but found no warmth beneath my fingers. "He's dead," I stated, the finality of my words sinking in. As we prepared to leave, a sudden chill enveloped the chamber, the temperature dropping drastically. Our breath became visible, swirling in the frigid air. Tom clutched his jacket tighter, eyes wide with fear. "We need to go," he insisted, urgency creeping into his voice. We hurried back to our camp, the unease lingering like a heavy fog. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a weak light through the entrance of the cave. The beauty of the morning contrasted sharply with the dread that weighed on us. Over the next few days, the incident remained on our minds, the image of the lifeless man haunting our thoughts. When we finally returned to civilization, the story of our discovery spread quickly, drawing attention from both the media and local authorities. They were baffled by the lack of explanation, no fingerprints, no identification, nothing to link him to any known person. Months passed, and the case went cold, the mystery unsolved. But the unease never left me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, waiting. The pristine beauty of Alaska seemed to conceal more than just its natural wonders. It held secrets that were best left undisturbed. One evening, years after the expedition, I received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the paper aged and yellowed. Inside was a single photograph of the snow cave, taken years after our discovery. But in the image, there was someone else, a shadowy figure standing beside the man we had found, their presence barely discernible but undeniably there. Confused and unsettled, I decided to revisit the cave, driven by a need for closure. Accompanied by a local guide, we navigated the treacherous terrain, the memory of that cold discovery fueling my determination. As we approached the entrance, the landscape seemed unchanged, the snow as pristine as it had been years ago. We ventured into the cave, the familiar sights bringing a sense of déjà vu. In the chamber where we had found him, everything appeared the same until I noticed it. The snow had been disturbed, traces of footprints leading away from the body, circling the area in a pattern that made no sense. They looped around and around, never leading anywhere, as if the man had been moving in an endless circle before his untimely death. "Look at these," I pointed out to the guide. "They go nowhere." He frowned, examining the footprints. "This is bizarre. It's like he was stuck in a loop." As we studied the tracks, a faint sound echoed through the chamber, a soft, mournful whisper that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The temperature dropped again, the chill more intense than before. I felt a presence, an unseen force pressing in on me, making it hard to breathe. The whispers grew louder, forming indistinct words that sent shivers down my spine. "Help us find peace." I turned to the guide, but he was gone, vanished into thin air as if swallowed by the cave. Panic surged through me as I called out, my voice echoing back to me without a response. The footprints began to glow faintly, the snow beneath them shimmering with an ethereal light. Suddenly, the ground beneath me gave way, and I plunged into darkness, the chill enveloping me completely. I struggled to regain control, but the sensation was overwhelming, as if the cave itself was holding me captive. Visions flashed before my eyes, fragments of lives interrupted, moments of fear and desperation frozen in time. I saw the man's final moments, trapped in his own unending loop, his eyes reflecting the same hollowness I had felt that day. The shadowy figure from the photograph appeared beside him, a silent guardian or perhaps a tormentor, his presence a constant reminder of the unexplained death. Desperate to escape, I focused on my breathing, trying to calm the storm of images and sensations. Slowly, the grip of the cave loosened, and I found myself back in the chamber, gasping for breath. The footprints had returned to normal, leading out of the chamber and away from the man's frozen body. I stumbled out of the cave, the morning light breaking through the entrance, dispelling the lingering darkness. As I turned to leave, I glanced back one last time. The man stood there, watching me with those empty eyes, the shadowy figure now standing beside him, his presence a silent warning. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I fled the cave, the weight of the experience pressing down on me like the heavy Alaskan snow. The mystery of the man's death remained unsolved, a chilling reminder of the unknown forces that dwell in the heart of the wilderness. Years have passed since that day, but the memory never fades. The unseen frost, as it has come to be known, serves as a cautionary tale for those who dare to venture too far into the wild, where the lines between reality and the supernatural blur, and the echoes of the lost linger in the silent, frozen expanse. Sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees and the darkness feels too thick, I can almost hear the whispers of those who never found peace, a haunting reminder that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, forever etched in the icy heart of Alaska. Story number 6. Shadow in the Tundra. I've always been fascinated by the unknown, the legends that lurk in the remote corners of our world. Growing up in Anchorage, Alaska, I was no stranger to tales of the wilderness, the towering mountains, the endless snow, and the enigmatic creature known locally as Bigfoot, Alaska. Most dismissed it as folklore, a relic of old hunters' stories passed down through generations. But something about those stories always gnawed at me, compelling me to seek the truth. It was the winter of 2018 when I decided to embark on what I called the search, armed with nothing but my camera, a sturdy pair of boots, and an insatiable curiosity. I ventured into the heart of the Alaskan wilderness. My plan was simple: document any signs of the elusive Bigfoot and perhaps, just perhaps, capture undeniable evidence of its existence. The first few days were uneventful. I trekked through dense forests blanketed in snow, my breath visible in the frigid air. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of my footsteps and the occasional call of a distant owl. As I delved deeper into the wilderness, the stories I'd heard from locals echoed in my mind. Tales of enormous footprints that appeared overnight, of heavy footsteps pounding through the night, and of a shadowy figure glimpsed fleetingly between the trees. On the fourth night, as I set up camp beneath a canopy of frost-covered pines, I heard it, a thudding sound, rhythmic and heavy, echoing through the stillness. My heart pounded as I reached for my flashlight, its beams slicing through the darkness. For a moment, I saw nothing but the swaying branches and the blanket of snow. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of something massive moving between the trees. I froze, every nerve on edge. The creature was colossal, its form obscured by the shadows, but the sheer size was undeniable. I held my breath, watching as it moved with an unnatural grace, leaving behind a trail of deep, imprinted footprints in the fresh snow. My mind raced. Could this be Bigfoot, Alaska? Determined to get closer, I followed the footprints, careful to stay downwind to mask my scent. The trail led me to a clearing where the moonlight revealed more footprints, each one larger and more defined than the last. My excitement was palpable, tempered by a growing sense of unease. The forest seemed to close in around me, the trees whispering secrets I couldn't comprehend. As I pressed forward, the temperature seemed to drop, the air growing colder with each step. My flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced menacingly around me. Then, I heard it again, the thudding footsteps, closer this time, echoing through the night. Panic surged through me as I turned to see the creature standing at the edge of the clearing, its eyes reflecting the dim light with an eerie intelligence. I stumbled backward, my legs refusing to move. The creature tilted its head, studying me with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. It let out a low, guttural growl, a sound that resonated deep within me. Without warning, it lunged forward, disappearing into the darkness as swiftly as it had appeared. Terrified, I fled back to my camp, the sound of heavy footsteps following me until I reached the safety of my tent. I huddled inside, heart racing, trying to steady my breathing. The night was filled with unsettling noises, whispers carried by the wind, the snapping of twigs, and the occasional distant roar. Sleep eluded me as I lay there, every shadow a potential threat. The next morning, I awoke to find the campsite disturbed. My gear was scattered, and the footprints from the night before led directly into the tent. A sinking feeling took hold of me. I wasn't alone. I grabbed my camera and ventured outside, the daylight doing little to dispel the lingering fear. The footprints had vanished, as if erased by the night's horrors. Days turned into weeks, and my search became increasingly desperate. I scoured every inch of the wilderness, following faint signs and listening for any hint of the creature's presence. But each night, the haunting footsteps returned, a relentless reminder that I was being watched, hunted by an unseen predator. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I stumbled upon a hidden alcove nestled between two massive boulders. The area was eerily quiet, the snow untouched except for a single, large footprint embedded in the ice. My heart raced as I approached, the weight of anticipation pressing down on me. Suddenly, A blinding light illuminated the alcove, and the creature stepped into view. This time, I could see it clearly, massive, covered in thick, matted fur, its eyes burning with a mix of intelligence and malice. It stood on two legs, towering over me, a grotesque fusion of man and beast. The air grew thick with tension as we locked eyes, the silence between us deafening. Without warning, it let out a blood-curdling scream, a sound that shattered the stillness and sent me fleeing in terror. I ran blindly through the forest, the creature's presence a looming shadow behind me. The landscape seemed to warp, the trees twisting into nightmarish shapes, the snow transforming into a treacherous maze. My mind played tricks on me, visions of the creature stalking me through the blinding white. I stumbled upon a frozen river, the ice slick and unstable beneath my feet. Desperate, I scrambled across, the cold biting into my skin, my muscles aching from exhaustion. The creature was relentless, the screams echoing around me, a constant reminder of my impending doom. Just as I reached the opposite bank, the ice beneath me gave way, plunging me into the frigid waters below. I fought against the cold, struggling to surface, but the icy grip of the river held me tight. The creature hovered above, its eyes gleaming with satisfaction as it watched me drown in the frozen depths. With one final surge of willpower, I broke free, gasping for air as I clambered onto the icy shore. The creature was gone, leaving me alone with the echoes of its haunting presence. Shivering and broken, I made my way back to civilization, the horrors of the wilderness etched into my very soul. The search for Bigfoot Alaska had transformed from a quest for truth into a nightmarish ordeal, a relentless pursuit by a creature that defied explanation. The local reports became a blur of confusion and fear, each story adding layers to the legend that I had come face to face with. Years later, I still dream of those haunted woods, the endless footsteps, and the shadowy figure that stalked me through the snow. The mystery of Bigfoot Alaska remains unsolved, a chilling reminder of the unknown that lurks in the wilds. Some say the creature is a guardian of the wilderness, a protector of secrets best left undiscovered. Others believe it's a cursed soul, forever trapped between man and beast. I share my story not just as a recounting of my terrifying experience, but as a warning. The Alaskan wilderness holds mysteries that challenge our understanding, creatures that embody the untamed spirit of nature itself. If you ever find yourself venturing into the frozen expanse, remember the legend of Bigfoot Alaska. Listen to the whispers of the wind and heed the echoes of the night. For in the heart of the wilderness, shadows hold secrets that are better left in the dark. Sometimes, when the northern lights dance across the sky and the snow glistens under their ethereal glow, I can almost hear the distant thudding of footsteps, a haunting reminder that some legends are born from truths too terrifying to acknowledge. Story number 7. The Night Shadows of Frostvale. I never imagined that a simple job transfer would lead me to the haunted whispers of Frostvale, a forgotten town nestled deep within the Alaskan wilderness. As a journalist for a regional newspaper, my assignment was straightforward: cover the relocation of residents fleeing the unexplained attacks that had turned Frostvale into a ghost town overnight. But what I uncovered was a story far more chilling than any headline I could have imagined. Frostvale was once a thriving community, its economy fueled by fur trading and the promise of untouched wilderness. Families lived in harmony with nature, their lives intertwined with the rhythm of the seasons. But one harsh winter, everything changed. Reports began to surface of strange creatures lurking in the shadows, stealing livestock under the cover of darkness. At first, the incidents were sporadic, dismissed as tales spun by desperate farmers. But as the attacks grew more frequent and brutal, fear took root in every heart. I arrived in what remained of Frostvale on a frigid December morning, the remnants of abandoned homes standing as silent testaments to the panic that had gripped the town. Snow blanketed the streets, muffling the echoes of my footsteps as I made my way to the town square. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, broken only by the occasional creak of a swaying sign or the distant howl of the wind through the skeletal trees. The local sheriff, a grizzled man named Hank Thompson, met me at the square. His eyes bore the weight of countless sleepless nights, his presence a stark contrast to the desolate surroundings. "Welcome to Frostvale," he greeted, his voice gravelly from years of shouting over the winter storms. "Not much left here, but I'll give you what I can." We walked through the hollowed streets, passing boarded-up storefronts and houses with doors hanging off their hinges. Hank recounted the timeline of events, the first reports of missing livestock, the sightings of shadowy figures moving with unnatural speed, and the growing desperation that led families to pack up and leave in the dead of night. "They called them the night shadows," Hank explained, his gaze distant as he recalled the horrors. "Nothing like we've ever seen before. They move silently, blend into the darkness. One night, Old Man Jenkins didn't come back from his farm. The next morning, his cattle were gone, and there was no sign of him." As dusk approached, I decided to explore the outskirts of the town, where the attacks were said to be most frequent. The forest loomed large, its dense canopy hiding secrets that the townsfolk dared not speak of. Armed with a flashlight and a recorder, I ventured into the woods, the crunch of snow under my boots the only sound accompanying me. The deeper I went, the more oppressive the silence became. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves heightened my anxiety. My flashlight beam danced across the trees, revealing glimpses of movement just beyond the edge of visibility. It was then that I heard it, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper carried by the wind. "Leave now." I froze, heart pounding in my chest. The voice was ethereal, filled with sorrow and menace. I swung my flashlight towards the sound, but saw nothing. Determined to push through the fear, I continued deeper into the forest, following the whispers that seemed to guide me towards the unknown. After what felt like hours, I stumbled upon a clearing bathed in the pale light of the moon. In the center stood an ancient stone cairn, its surface etched with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the moonlight. The air was thick with an otherworldly energy, the temperature dropping noticeably as I approached. As I reached out to touch the symbols, the ground beneath me trembled, and the whispers intensified into a chorus of anguished voices. Shadows coalesced around the cairn, taking on forms that defied human understanding: elongated limbs, featureless faces, and eyes that gleamed with an unnatural light. "You should not have come," the voices intoned, their collective presence overwhelming. "This place is cursed. Leave while you still can." Panic surged through me as the shadows began to move, advancing towards me with a predatory grace. I backed away, stumbling over roots and rocks as the entities closed in, their whispers turning into guttural chants of despair. Desperate to escape, I turned and fled, the forest seeming to stretch endlessly before me. The whispers followed, now loud enough to be a constant hum in my ears, driving me to the brink of madness. Branches clawed at my face, and the snow whipped into my eyes, making it nearly impossible to see. Just as I thought I couldn't run any further, I burst out of the forest and onto the outskirts of Frostvale. The town lay silent and still, the only sign of life the flickering lights of abandoned buildings. I collapsed onto the snow-covered ground, gasping for breath, the echoes of the night shadows still ringing in my ears. Days later, I returned to Frostvale, my body and mind battered by the experience. The town seemed untouched by time, as if frozen in that moment of terror. I sat in the town square, reflecting on what I had witnessed, when a figure approached from the shadows. It was Sheriff Hank, his expression grim. "You saw them too, didn't you?" he asked quietly, taking a seat beside me. "The night shadows aren't just creatures. They're manifestations of our fears, our grief, and our guilt." Frostvale's isolation amplified these emotions, giving birth to something we couldn't control. He handed me a weathered journal, the pages filled with notes and sketches of the attacks. Captain Harding kept records before he disappeared, I believe the cairn was an attempt to contain whatever it was we had unleashed. But it seems the seals have weakened over time. As I flipped through the journal, I found entries detailing the town's descent into madness, the nights of terror, the desperate measures taken to protect what little they had left, and the eventual abandonment of Frostvale. The last entry was a plea for understanding, a recognition that some forces are beyond human comprehension. Determined to give Frostvale a voice, I compiled the journal's contents into a comprehensive report, hoping to shed light on the mysterious events that had consumed the town. But as I prepared to leave, I felt a presence behind me, a cold, suffocating weight that pressed down on my chest. I turned slowly, flashlight beam sweeping the square, but saw nothing. The whispers returned, softer now, like a distant memory. Leave forever. Fear gripped me as I hurried out of Frostvale, the shadows of the town lingering in my mind long after I had left its borders. The experience left an indelible mark on me, a reminder of the thin veil between reality and the supernatural, and the darkness that can fester in the most unexpected places. Back in Anchorage, I published my findings. The story of Frostvale capturing the imagination of readers and sparking debates among skeptics and believers alike. Yet, no matter how many times I revisited the events, the true nature of the night shadows remained elusive, a haunting mystery that refused to be unraveled. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the city streets at night, I catch a faint whisper on the breeze, a reminder of Frostvale's tragic fate and the lingering presence of the night shadows. It serves as a chilling testament to the unknown horrors that lie in wait, just beyond the edge of perception, ready to consume those who dare to uncover their secrets.